How's it going? This is a mushroom coral during a night dive, and this is how it looks when we shine UV light at it. It is a fluorescent organism. Now, I won this really cool Orca Torch dive light with a UV mode, and I've had a good time shining this light at different organisms during night dives, like this anemone. So the anemone lights up in this bright green, and behind it, the anemone fish, they don't light up, they're not fluorescent. Nevertheless, they seem a little bit confused because 1 second ago it was night, and now the home anemone has turned into this bright street light. And I didn't do this for too long, so to not stress the fish for too much. But I think this is quite a striking image, this dark fish in front of this fluorescent anemone. Now, I have found that a lot of hard corals also light up. Typically these are shades of green and blue. There's another mushroom coral here, a fungite, and a type of shot which I think is quite spectacular is something like this, where there is an animal like this moray eel, which is not fluorescent, in front of encrusting corals which are fluorescent. So you see the outline of the fish, it looks even more like a little monster. So these corals now shine light, and that attracts shrimp, and then the moray eel is hunting for the shrimp. So, spectacular imagery in my eyes, and I've really seen a lot of underwater footage. Now, there are some soft corals here, and they're also lighting up, and they're moving around. Partially this is movement coming from the animal itself, partially this is from the surges here. And again, you can see a couple of shrimp in front of the soft coral. There is another hard coral, and this is yet another fungite, another mushroom coral, and you see this little shrimp which live on or around this coral. This is a fire anemone. I actually got stung really bad a couple of months by touching one of these by accident, so don't do that. But they also light up in this really spectacular yellow green, and again you get this kind of shot where the shrimp, which are not fluorescent, they look really interesting in front of this very bright background. So the light is coming from the other side. So I love this video light. Now I am in front of a bamboo, not too far from the dive site. And if you tick somewhat like me, now after seeing this footage, you're asking the questions. How does this work? How does this fluorescent work? And why does this exist in these animals? Now, if you think back at the footage, all the animals which are fluorescent are cnidarians, meaning they are hard corals, soft corals, and anemones. Jellyfish obviously are also cnidarians, they were not in the footage. This group of animals, which is at the base of the animal phylogenetic tree, of the family tree of all animals, this group has a number of chromophores, of proteins, which do exactly that. They absorb ultraviolet light, and then a couple of amino acids there become excited, and then they emit light back in the visible spectrum, and then that's the light we can see. And there are several families of these fluorescent proteins, and they emit in a range of colors. There is green, there is yellow, there is blue even. And now, normally it's not the case that, exotic proteins of marine organisms get a lot of attention in the research community. But there is one such protein, the green fluorescent protein, which has become a very powerful tool in molecular biology. And this is a small protein, and molecular biologists and cell biologists would genetically, transgenically attach this to other proteins, and then it would end up, in certain parts of a cell or in certain parts of an organism, and by then shining ultraviolet light onto these cells and organisms, you could tell where does the protein of interest end up. So this is a really popular tool in molecular biology these days. Now, hence there is a lot of very excellent scientific literature on this topic. And so, as I've mentioned, there are several families of these proteins and in different cnidarians. And the question now is, why did these animals evolve that? So, in biology, there's the struggle for existence, right? So no animal will just evolve a protein for the aesthetic pleasures of scuba divers with a UV light. But, they will obviously have a function which helps these animals to thrive, to grow, or, to deter predators, something like that. And I found a couple of really interesting publications, I'm linking to them in the description. And there are a couple of not mutually exclusive explanations, meaning, it's not that only one of these explanations can be true. It can be that several of them are in fact correct. And one explanation is that this is a photoprotective protein, or these are photoprotective proteins, meaning corals sometimes grow in really shallow water in the tropics where there's a very strong sunlight. And then these proteins would need to capture some of this excessive UV radiation and essentially emit it back as harmless visual spectrum light to make sure that the coral organism is not damaged by UV light. And so this will be related to the fact that there are these Symbiodinium, these zooxanthellae, unicellular algae in a lot of these anemones and particularly in a lot of corals. And this the Symbiodinium, they produce photosynthetically active. They produce biological energy from sunlight that feeds these corals, but they also produce these highly reactive oxygen species. So they produce oxygen molecules which can do damage to the cells. And these green fluorescent protein-like proteins, which we saw Fluoresce in the footage before, they might be active in, capturing these excessive oxygen radicals. There is another really interesting suggestion, which is that this is essentially a camouflage color. So these algae would have colors which they are from photosynthetic pigments. So the color of the algae is similar to the color of plants. And then when they're herbivorous, so, plant and algae feeding fishes in the water, they would go for this algae in the coral. So they would start eating the coral and containing this tasty algae. But if there is another protein with a strong color in the coral, this would give the coral a different color, and the herbivorous fish would not be able to recognize anymore that this is actually somewhat like plant material, and this would be food for the fish. And there is actually a study, I'm also linking to that, which shows that depending on the fluorescent protein, which a type of coral called Galaxea contains, these Galaxea corals are bleaching easier or harder. So, we've mentioned these tiny algae, and these tiny algae are absolutely necessary for corals. And when it gets too hot, the corals get rid of them because they produce too many of these reactive oxygen species, which we have also discussed. And in these Galaxea corals, mentioned in this study, when they have the green type fluorescent proteins, they are less likely to bleach than when they have the brown type So, likely a number of functions, probably at least several related to photoprotection and protection from highly reactive oxygen species. I hope this was interesting to you. There's of course a lot of footage, and there are lots of nice still photographs on the internet made by shining fluorescent light on marine organisms. But I'm not sure if anybody has looked at the scientific literature and digested them for the interested lay woman and man, interested lay diver. So I hope that this little reef here I gave you about green fluorescent protein related proteins in cnidarians, this fulfills this function. And check back soon. There will be more really interesting marine bio content soon. And as usual, I'm always happy to answer questions if you leave them in the comments. And bye.